Good morning. We are about to begin the last and final part of the positive commandments that the Rambam lists out in his book of the Rambam. So come along, join with me as we learn from mitzvah number 167 all the way to positive mitzvah number 248. Mitzvah 167 goes as follows: to rest on the holiday of Shmini Atzeret, on the 8th day of Sukkot. As it says in the verse, on the 8th day there shall be a sacred holiday. 168 is to dwell in the sukkah for 7 days. That's a pretty popular mitzvah. As it says in the verse, and you shall dwell in the sukkah for 7 days. The next mitzvah is to shake the lulav. The next mitzvah is to sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. As it says in the verse, it will be a day of shofar blasts for you on that day. The next mitzvah, number 171, is to give a half shekel each year as a gift of like a tax, which they would give to the temple. Everyone was obligated to give a half a shekel. As it says in the verse, this shall be given by all those included in the census. So they would give a half a shekel, and ultimately they were able to count. There was a census done of all the people. 172 is to listen to any prophet that will rise in any era, provided that he does not add or detract from the Torah's commandment. As it says in the Torah, you shall listen to him. To appoint a king, as it says, you shall surely set a king upon yourselves. 174 is to obey the high court regarding all the various laws that they will set for the Jewish people. So if the high court says that there's a certain law that has to be strengthened, or they make a certain decree, so that means we have to follow that. 175 is to follow the majority if there is a difference of opinion in the Sanhedrin, in the high court, concerning a law. As it says in the verse, follow after the majority. So this is the base where the Torah tells us that whenever there is an argument, you follow the lead. Whatever side has more, the majority, that's the law is according to them. 176 is to appoint judges in every Jewish community. 177 is to treat the litigants when they come to court to equally look at them equally when they come. So even though one guy might be rich and one guy might be poor, we have to look at them equally when they come to the court. As it says, judge your fellow man with righteousness. This is a very important law. 178 is for anyone who has evidence. It's a mitzvah for them to testify in court. As it says, if he has a witness who saw or knew, so then he can come and give his testify. 179 is to cross-examine the witnesses thoroughly. As it says in the verse, that you should really go and carefully inquire exactly what they are saying. 180 is to punish false witnesses by giving them the same penalty as they wanted to impose on the other person. So this is actually a very interesting mitzvah where if someone is trying to do something to someone else falsely, then they actually in turn get that on themselves. As it says in the verse, and you shall do to him what he plotted to do to his brother. It's actually a very fascinating mitzvah, this one. 181, next mitzvah, is to decapitate the calf, which was brought as an atonement for an unsolved murder. So if the high court heard of a certain case of murder, which they had no idea who killed this person, so then there was the Torah spells out a whole story, exactly what you're supposed to do, which involves decapitating a calf. 182 is to prepare 6 cities of refuge throughout Israel, that if in a case when someone by mistake killed someone, he has a place to be saved and he has to stay in that city of refuge. 183 is to give the Levites cities in which to dwell in, and those cities are also going to be included as the cities of refuge. 185, and now we're talking about the laws of idol worship a little bit, is to destroy false gods and other objects of worship. As it says, you shall surely destroy them. 186 is to slay the inhabitants of an apostate city and burn the city. So that's an interesting law. When you have a whole city, which is actually in Hebrew called the Ir Hanidachat. The next mitzvah, 187, is to destroy the 7 nations that dwelt in Israel. As the verse says, that you shall destroy them. The next one is to exterminate Amalek. As it says, blot out the memory of Amalek. So this is actually a mitzvah which, till today, we read about this. As we see in the next mitzvah, 189, is that we should have to constantly remember what Amalek did to us. 190 is in regards to the laws of a voluntary war. The Torah prescribes exactly what the laws are, and that's how we have to follow when we go to a voluntary war. 191 is to appoint a priest who will address the people before battle. As it says in the verse, and it shall come to pass when you approach the battle, the priest, the Kohen, will come forward and speak to the people. So when the Jewish people were going out to war, so they always would listen to some words of inspiration from the priest, who would tell them, do not be scared, God is with you, etc. The next mitzvah is actually a very practical mitzvah, which is that we have to prepare a place to go to the bathroom. It's actually a positive mitzvah. As it says in the verse, prepare a place for yourselves outside the camp. Today, I think we're allowed to do it inside our houses. 193 is to prepare a shovel for the bathroom. As it says, you shall have a shovel in addition to your weapons. So it's actually talking about the military, that except for their weapons, they also, a mitzvah was to have a shovel along so they could use it. 194, we move along to another topic, is to return a stolen object. So if a person steals, it's a mitzvah for him to return it. As it says in the verse, and he shall return the object which he stole. 195 is to give charity. As it says, you shall surely open your hand to your poor brother. 196 is to give a severance gift to a Hebrew servant. So if you have a Hebrew servant, back in the day they used to have that, and he's now going and he finished, serving his master. So then it's a mitzvah to give him gifts as he leaves. 197 is to lend to the poor. That's a mitzvah that you have to, if someone needs some help, it's a mitzvah to help him. Next mitzvah is that if you lend to a Gentile, so then you can take interest. As it says, take interest from a Gentile. 199 is to return security to its owner. So if you're lending someone something and you take a security for it, there's a mitzvah for you to return that back once the loan is complete. Mitzvah 200 is to pay a worker his wage on time. As it says, pay him his wage on the day it is due. It's a good mitzvah to know. Mitzvah 201, for a hired worker to be allowed to eat from the produce while he is working with it. So if he's working in the field and he's, harvesting certain fruits or vegetables or whatever, he's allowed to eat some while he's in the field, but he's not allowed to take any home with him. So only while he's at the job is he allowed to eat from it. Next mitzvah 202 is to assist someone who you meet in unloading a burden from his animal. So if his donkey, let's say, got stuck on the side of the road and it's full of many packages and he has to take everything off, so it's a mitzvah to stop and help him. Maybe it's similar to like a flat tire today. I don't know. The next mitzvah is to help someone to load back the load onto the animal. As it says, you shall lift it up with him. Next mitzvah is to return a lost object. If you find something, there's a mitzvah where it says that you should return it, find its rightful owner, and do not look away. And that's a very powerful mitzvah. The Torah tells you can't just say, oh, well, I didn't actually see it. No. You actually got to go, take it, go through all the lengths of finding out who this belongs to. As it says in the verse, you shall surely return them to your brother. 205, to rebuke a person who sins. As it says, you shall surely rebuke your fellow man. Obviously through love. To love every member of our people. As it says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. 207, to love a convert. As it says, and you shall love a convert. Next mitzvah, 208, is that we have to balance scales with correct weights. It's a law in regards to stealing, that you should not steal by having incorrect weights. So that's an important mitzvah. The next mitzvah is to honor sages, as it says, rise before an elder. Next mitzvah is to honor one's father and mother. Next mitzvah is to fear one's father and mother, as it says in the verse. Next mitzvah, 212, is to be fruitful and multiply. It's actually the first mitzvah in the Torah. Once we're talking about having children and being fruitful and multiply, so now the Rambam goes on to marital laws. So mitzvah number 213 is to have sexual relations within marriage. Next mitzvah is 214, is for a groom to rejoice together with his wife for a year. Meaning that even though there are many different things that are going on, let's say people are going to war, he would stay behind because he just got married. Next mitzvah is to circumcise a son. As it says, on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Next mitzvah is an interesting mitzvah. Could be you haven't heard of it. 216 is to marry the widow of one's brother who died childless. So if someone had a brother who got married, and now the brother died, and he didn't have any children, so there's actually a mitzvah on the guy who his brother passed away, that he should now go and marry that widowed wife, his sister-in-law, so to speak. But now if he doesn't want to get married, so then there's a special directive and process what he has to do in order to take away that connection, so to speak, and that that commandment. And one of those things is to remove his shoe to be removed from his foot. This widow has to remove the shoe off her brother-in-law's foot, as it says in the verse, and she shall remove his shoe from his foot. It's a very interesting mitzvah. We're not going to get involved in the details of it over here. As I mentioned, we're talking about a lot of mitzvahs. We're not going into the full detail of it. There's a lot to be discussed, but this is the gist of it, the short of it. Next mitzvah is 218, which we might say this is the Torah's sense of humor over here. For a rapist to marry the woman he raped. So he has to marry that woman now. 219, for a person who made a not good remark about his wife in a very strong form, where he says that she went off with another man, and it turns out that it wasn't true. The Torah says that he actually has to stay married to his wife, and he's not allowed to divorce her. Because it could be that the whole reason that he made up this whole story was in order to divorce her, because he wanted to go be with someone else. So now the Torah says, you made up a story about her? Well, now you got to stay married to her. Next mitzvah is 220 is to carry out the judgment concerning a seducer. There is a special fine. The Torah says that a person has to give 50 shekels, as it says it in the verse. 221 is to carry out the procedure that the Torah prescribes in regards to a Yafat Toar. Yafat Toar means a very beautiful woman. And this is in regards to the time when the Jewish people were going to war. And during the time of war, and if they saw a young, beautiful woman among the captives and he wanted to marry this woman, so then there was a whole procedure how that would work. 222 is the laws of divorce, that a person who wants to get divorced, it has to be with a get. It's a special divorce bill, as it says in the verse, and he shall write a bill of divorce for her and place it in her hand. 223 is to carry out this special procedure in regards to a sota. A sota is a woman who is married and her husband tells her, do not speak to this specific man, and she is found with him. And then there's a procedure what to be done. A whole long set of laws, very fascinating, not to be explained right now. The next mitzvah is to whip the wicked who have done certain sins. Next mitzvah 225 is to exile a person who accidentally kills a person. As we spoke before, that there were these cities of refuge for someone who mistakenly killed someone, and he now had to go to this city. So he has to go into exile away from the rest of his family, of his city, and go to the city of refuge. As it says that he shall dwell there in that city of refuge until the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, dies. 226, for a court, these are the various laws in regards to execution by the high court. There are 4 different ways. So the first one is by decapitation, by sword. Second one is by strangling. Third one is by burning, where they would pour hot lead down the person's throat. And the fourth one is by stoning. So these are 4 types of executions. The next one is that after a person was killed because of a certain sin, whichever one, and there are various sins depending, and that would be the outcome in the different forms of execution. There was a mitzvah to hang the corpse of the dead person, to have it hung, but only for the duration of that day. Because the next mitzvah, 231, is that we have to bury that person's body on the same day as he was executed, as it says, you shall surely bury him on that day. The next mitzvah is in regards to a Hebrew servant. As it says, when you will purchase a Hebrew servant, there are special laws in regards how one must treat him very, very well. So too also in regards to the mitzvah of a maidservant, that it's a mitzvah for the person to eventually, if she wants, that he can marry her. And ultimately she will be redeemed and she will be taken out of the state of being a maidservant. In general, there's another mitzvah which is to redeem a maidservant. It's very embarrassing for a woman to be a maidservant, and to have her redeemed is a mitzvah. 235 is that if a person has a Canaanite, a non-Jewish servant, so then he's allowed to keep him for forever. Because a Jewish servant, there's actually, as we spoke yesterday, there's the Jubilee year, property goes back to the original owner, and so too also the Hebrew servant would go back to his own ownership at that point, versus a non-Jewish one. 236, we're almost at the end. For a person who injures someone, to pay the damages for what he did. As it says, if men will quarrel, and one man will strike his colleague, he now has to pay him. There's actually 5 things that he has to pay him, as we will learn in a while from now. The Rambam discusses all the different details of how that works. 237 is to judge regarding the damages caused by an ox. So if someone's property, his ox, goes and hurts someone or something, so now he has to pay that. 238 is if a person dug a pit, and now that pit, someone fell into it, and he didn't take care of making sure that it should be secure, so now he has to pay for the damages that it caused. The next mitzvah is in regards to a thief, that we have to judge him and we have to make sure that he has to pay up what he stole. The next mitzvah is in regards to the damages caused by a person's animal by them grazing and eating, and by their animal going into other people's fields and so on. As it says in the verse, if a person will graze his animals in a field or a vineyard. 241, to judge regarding the damages caused by fire. So if a person starts a fire, as it says in the verse, if a fire will break out and catch in thorns, well, now he has a responsibility. Hopefully he has a good insurance policy. 242 is to render judgment in questions regarding an unpaid watchman. So if we have an unpaid watchman, so there is a certain set of laws of what he is liable to pay if something happens to what he is watching over. The next one is in regards to a watchman who is being paid, or a renter, which is the similar where you're paying and you're watching over a certain object. Then you have the next mitzvah in regards to someone who borrows something. So I'm borrowing from you and I'm not paying you for it. So then, as it says in the verse, should a person give a donkey or an ox? So then we have the laws regarding a borrower. The next mitzvah is number 245. We have to render judgment in questions regarding to business transactions, as it says, if you will sell merchandise to your colleague. So then there are the laws of how this works. 246, three to the end. 246 is to render judgment in regarding to claims made by one person against another person. So if someone says, "Hey, you owe me $100," and then he says, "No, I don't owe you $100," so now they come to court. So the court has to deal with it and give the law. The next mitzvah is that if a person is being chased after and is about to be killed, it's a mitzvah to make sure to save that person, even if it means that you're going to kill the killer. As it says in the verse, and you shall cut off her hand, where we see that it's going all the way down till a very bloody scene. 248, and this is the last mitzvah of positive mitzvahs counted out by the Rambam. We complete it today, is to render judgment in regards to inheritances. As it says in the verse, if a person dies without having a son, so then you have to see how to split up that inheritance. It goes to the daughters, etc. If he doesn't have any daughters, it goes to the brothers, and so on. But these are the 248 positive commandments which the Rambam gives us a very basic window into seeing what the positive commandments of a Jew living in this world, all the way till 2020, how we are supposed to live our lives. So many of these mitzvahs are not applicable today. As we will continue learning within the actual laws in regards to every mitzvah when we go into the detail. But there are actually 87 out of these 248 which we practically do all the way today. Here in the United States, it is so many years after the giving of the Torah. So there are 87 of these mitzvahs that we perform all the time. So on a yearly basis during our life, we will hopefully do all these 87 mitzvahs. Tomorrow, God willing, we will be learning and we will start the negative commandments, which there are a few more than 248. There are actually 365 negative commandments, but that we'll have to wait till tomorrow. All right? Have a very good day. All the best.